board gamers, and welcome back to Not Board Gaming. I'm your host, I'm Mark. Now today's video is going to be the first in an occasional series which I'm calling The Cult of the Old. And why? Why am I looking at older games? Well, as gamers we all get caught up in trying to have a look for the new and fastest and latest and best new edition. So, we spend a lot of time seeking out maybe a Marvel Champions or finding out when the next Kickstarter for Dungeon Degenerates is. But there are a wealth and a plethora of games that are out there that, quite frankly, we sometimes neglect. Now, not everybody has been in the hobby for a long time, and many years. Not everybody's collections are overflowing. There are some people that are new to the hobby, and some people joining the hobby all the time. So I think it's well worth looking at some of the games in the collection, in people's collections that maybe have completed their cycle, but are still well worth looking at. And today's video is going to be about, of course, as you can see in the background, Eldritch Horror. Now, this is, of course, one of Fantasy Flight's games. It's set in the Arkham universe, and it's potentially the most sprawling, globe-trotting game in the Arkham universe. It is a game where you will play one of a few investigators. Now, as a solo player, you can absolutely play it as a single investigator. Chances are you're going to play it kind of double-handed or more, and you're going to run around the world and the globe, and you're going to be in London or Istanbul or Sydney or Rome, and you're going to be seeking out one of the ancient ones. So, without much further ado, let's have a look at Eldritch Horror by Fantasy Flight. So before we start, I think it's important to say that what I've got here is the base game and 3 of the 4 small box expansions that there are. There are also, a number of big box expansions as well, which generally add a modular board to it. So the 3 expansions that I'm using here is the Forsaken Lore expansion, which is almost universally, agreed that is a necessary expansion. I've also got Cities in Ruin and also Strange Remnants expansion. Everything is mixed together. So, if you're aware of any of the Fantasy Flight Arkham games, you know how this works. If not, here's a brief synopsis. You are going to play one of the many investigators that come with the game. And what you're going to try and do is defeat one of the ancient ones or stop their rituals from happening, which are going to bring them into the world. And how are you going to do this? Well, of course, this is a Fantasy Flight Arkham game. You're going to defeat these ancient ones by using cards. Many cards. However, we're getting slightly ahead of ourselves here because the real meat and potatoes of the game, yes, it has enough cards to kind of deforest an entire Amazonian rainforest in each box. However, each card has a purpose and it drives the game forward. What's generally going to happen is one of your investigators is going to be travelling, or both your investigators travelling around this world map, trying to defeat either various monsters, various epic monsters, or having, in some cases, having a fight or a combat encounter with the Ancient One themselves. They're going to be trying to close these gates which appear around the board and spawn monsters. They're also going to be limited in the amount that they can travel, and maybe in each area they come to, they will have an encounter in, say, one of the green areas, which is Buenos Aires, Arkham, or San Francisco, or a purple one, which is over in the east here, or an orange one, which is in Europe and into Africa. But there are also individual encounter cards, so maybe you're going to do a Mystic Ruins encounter, or you're going to close a gate, or you're going to have an encounter against a bad guy, or if you've got the Cities in Ruin, maybe there's a Devastated City encounter, or even a disaster encounter. And that's the beauty of this game. Yes, it's largely card driven, but because there are so many cards and so many decks to explore, that means each game that you play is absolutely unique and individual to you. So, of course, It's an Arkham game, and around this globe there are cultists and various bad guys who are trying to raise whichever ancient one you've chosen, and to battle that ancient one you will have chosen to start off with maybe 2 investigators. And these investigators, now there are a number that come with the base game, and then every expansion that you get adds even more investigators, and there is quite a good element of asymmetry in there. Actually choosing a pairing of the right investigators can change the flow of the game. So as we look here, we've got Tony Morgan. Now it's an Arkham game, we've got health and we've got sanity. That never changes in terms of going up beyond these, but of course that goes down, and when it goes down, your investigator either it dies or is defeated, and we'll come on to that later. They have a number of attributes down at the bottom, and again these are, you know, kind of law, influence, observation, strength and will, and what these do is you will carry out a number of tests as you go through the game, and they determine how many dice you roll. But given a great element of asymmetry should I say, each investigator comes with different starting items, and as you can see here, Tony Morgan comes with a pair of handcuffs. So there we go, that's his starting item there, and that says before resolving a strength test during a combat encounter, you may spend 1 focus to defeat a monster if it has a toughness of 2 or less. Whereas Zoe Samaras has a Holy Cross as her starting item, which is gained +2 will during combat encounters. So there's a large element of asymmetry. Now these helps, they start off fairly feeble, and these starting items certainly help them, and you can gain more items as you play the game, as you progress the game. There's a wealth of kind of other assets they can do. They can get unique assets, they can get artifacts, which are kind of magical items, they can get spells, and of course if you played any kind of Arkham game, there are a number of conditions that they can get as well, and generally in the main conditions aren't good. There are some ones that are okay in here, but they can be amnesia, they can be a back injury, you can be blessed, which is a good one, you can be cursed, which is obviously a bad one, you can have dark pacts, debt, you can be detained, you can have hallucinations, head injuries, internal injuries, leg injuries, lost in time and space, paranoia, poison, quick study, relentless, rugged, righteous. There's a wealth of kind of conditions that you can get which can either help or hinder your course. And that's great because, again, no 2 games are exactly the same, as each investigator will start branching out, getting their own assets and getting their own conditions. So generally, each round of the game will follow a similar structure. The first thing that your investigators are going to do is they're going to take 2 actions, and those actions are travel, which is moving, preparing for travel, which is getting a ticket which allows you to travel a little bit further, acquiring assets, which means that you can make a roll and get more kind of goodies to play with. You can rest and get some health or sanity back. You can maybe get a focus token, which comes out in one of the expansions, and that allows you to re-roll a die at any point. You can trade if you're on the same space as another investigator, and you can also carry out component actions. So if individual items have an action on there, you can do that. Once both investigators have done that, they are then going to move into the encounter phase. And that's where you will use one of the cards that comes with it to carry out an encounter based on the space that you're at, and also the tokens that are on that space. And then, after that, comes the Mythos phase, which is where you turn over a Mythos card. Now again, if you played any Fantasy Flight Arkham games, you know that Mythos is never good. And the Mythos cards are just one of the timers that are in the game. However, let's have a look at movement around the board. I know that movement is a frustrating experience for some players because generally your character and your investigator is going to make 1 move per turn. But for me, that's massively thematically important. You're not moving around the town of Arkham here. You're travelling along and around this massive world map. So I'm here, my Tony Morgan is here, and he's on space number 8, and he wants to move down to Buenos Aires. There's a grey line, that means it's a ship, route, so therefore he can move down there. If he had a ship token, which he'd got at any other point, he could make that move and move the token, one for each token that he got, and maximum of 2, along the ship line. But also, as you can see, there are red lines on here. If it was a train one, he could make one move, and if he had a train token, he could move again, but there's no other train line to move on there, so that couldn't happen. And that's the beauty of this game, is movement is absolutely key and paramount, because you could be at one side of the map, and then a gate opens or something happens on the other side of the map, and you've got to best plot out your way to get there, given the limited one space, generally one space movement per round that you have. And for me, that really adds a great kind of almost strategic element to a very tactical game. But why are we doing this? Why are we travelling around this map? Well, each ancient one that you encounter or that you decide to battle against will come with a number of mysteries. And to defeat the ancient one, what you've got to do is you've got to solve 3 of these mysteries. So, if we take a look at the mystery here I've got for Cthulhu, it says, the Queen of the Deep Ones, Mother Hydra, rises from her home in Johannesfly to oversee the teeming masses of her children. When this card enters play, spawn the Hydra epic monster on Space 8. So there we go. That's Space 8 up there. So my investigators now have to travel around this board trying to get to Space 8 with enough items and enough strength and enough abilities to actually defeat that monster. Once Hydra has been defeated, I can put a token on this card, and then at the end of the mythos phase, when I've defeated it, I will then unveil a 3rd mystery, and then that a 2nd mystery, and then I will try to solve that subsequent mystery. Once I've solved all 3, then that is the ancient one defeated. But there are obviously many ways that can never happen, be that through encounters, be that through one of the other timers, which is this doom token at the top of the board moving down, be that the fact that all of my investigators have been defeated, or there are certain cards you can pull out of the mythos pile which, if you don't solve those throughout the game, then they can end up in defeat for you as well. So a key component of all this are the encounters that you're going to have each and every turn. So let's have a look at how those encounters work, because they will ultimately dictate as to whether you defeat the Ancient One or you get defeated. Each and every turn that you take after you finish your actions, you then have to carry out an encounter. And that encounter is based either on the space that you're on, the goal that you're trying to achieve. Are you trying to get clues? Are you trying to defeat part of the Ancient One? Are you on a space that has one of the epic monsters? Or, one of the key things as well, is closing down gates. These gates pop up, and when these gates pop up, then monsters pop up on these gates, and that can then advance the Doom token as the counters go around the board. So therefore, closing gates and keeping on top of them is a key focus for it. Now, it's going to be a dice-based system of determining your success as to whether you complete or successfully pass or fail that encounter. Now that can be a bit problematic for some people because, of course, dice are very arbitrary in what they do. You can never guarantee that you're going to roll the results that you want. There are ways to mitigate them. For example, each of your abilities at the bottom here tells you how many dice you're going to roll. So let's have a look at this gate encounter here for Zoe. She's in Buenos Aires, so therefore to close the gate of Buenos Aires, I've picked this gate encounter card. And it says, you hear the sound of a terrible gust of wind and listen carefully to determine the origin of the sound. You may spend 1 clue, which Zoe has, to resolve the pass effect. If you do not spend the clue, resolve the fail effect. So now I'm here. And it says, something large and powerful is trying to break through a sealed trapdoor. The racket is startling and you consider running away. And there's a little head symbol on there, which means I carry out a will test. And here, against my will, it says that I've got 4, and that means I can roll 4 dice. Now, you can improve your skills throughout the game. You can get improvement tokens. So it's entirely feasible that I could have improved this to get 6 as a maximum on that, but I haven't. I've got 4 dice. And to carry out a will test or any of these tests is very straightforward. You roll the number of dice, and generally, if you roll a 5 or a 6 in any of those, you passed. If you haven't, you failed. However, it could say that roll a will test minus 1 dice or roll a will test minus 2 dice, and that again would mean that my 4 would go down to either 3 or 2. So let's have a look here. And there we go. Zoe actually got 3 5s and a 6 there, so she's passed that test. And here we go. It says, if you pass, you resolve to fend off the terrible beast, and with the help of the Yithians, you close this gate, and that would remove this particular gate from the board. You close this gate. If you fail, you flee in terror and from the approaching threat, and you lose 1 sanity. And that's how encounter systems work. You're going to, whichever space you're on, is going to drive a particular card, but also use encounters to actually combat monsters as well. Of course, combat encounters against the bad guys and the creatures and the monsters is a fairly key part of the game. And if you are on a space that has a monster token on it, you have to resolve that monster token, or however many monster tokens are on there, before you resolve any other kind of encounter. Now, combat against bad guys always resolves in 2 parts. First thing is you carry out a will test. So you'll roll the amount of will dice that your attributes say that you have, and if you score more successes than what's on this side here, then what happens is that monster, you don't suffer any damage, but if you score less successes than what's on there, then you will knock off some sanity, and then you move on to the strength test here. And the strength test, as you can see for this mummy, says it's my number of strength die -2. So Zoe has 3 strength on her attributes there. That means she would only roll 1 dice. But what you can do as your character is travelling around the board is you can gain assets and spells which help that. So say she got an ally here in the form of a syndicate agent, that meant for a combat encounter she would gain +2 during that combat encounter. So for this particular mummy, she starts with 3. It says -2, so that would put her down to 1 dice to roll, so you'd have to roll a success of a 5 or a 6 on that. However, she's got this card that she can use, which adds 2 to it, which takes her back to 3. So let's see. First of all, we've got a will roll, and we know that Zoe is on 4, so let's see. And she's rolled 1 success there, and that means that out of the 2 sanity there, 1 of them will damage her there, so that's a reduction of 1 sanity point for her. Then we're on to the combat, which we said is her strength 3, -2 dice on there, +2 dice on there, that's another 3. And let's have a look at how many successes I roll. 1 success. That means that monster has done 2 damage against me, -1, that is 1 damage against me. I've also done 1 damage against that monster off its total toughness of 3, so it's still got 2 left, and that will carry over into the next phase. That's, in essence, how combat works. There are different factors on the back of each card which kind of change how that works, and you can mitigate your strengths and weaknesses by having items, by having artifacts, by having spells, etc. And that is a great kind of combat system. There's a little bit swingy and arbitrary because of the dice, but because of the mitigations you can put in place means that each and every time you have an encounter, you're not guaranteed success or failure. One of the good things about the game is that death is not necessarily the end. If your investigator loses all their health or all their sanity, they're knocked over, their possessions are left where they are. You can claim them if you go on that space, but all you do is you choose another investigator that hasn't yet been used. So therefore, it's almost infinitely possible to expand your game beyond any kind of realm of possibility, depending on the number of investigators that you got there. That would seem too easy. That would just mean that you could continue playing. And you can't, because there are timers in this game. One of the timers is the Mythos deck. If you completed or turned over all of the Mythos cards, that's it, and you haven't defeated the bad guys, then that is it. The other timer is the mysteries. You will solve 3 mysteries, or aim to solve 3 mysteries. If you solve 3 mysteries, by the time before the Mythos card has actually finished, or the Doom time has gone down to the end and you've woken up the Elder One, then you will solve the game. However, one of the key things is the Doom track at the top. That progresses, not every round, because there are certain factors that kind of influence that, but what that means is that when it reaches 0, then the Elder One will awaken and there becomes a final mystery to solve. If you don't solve that mystery, then no matter how many investigators you've got left, it's game over. There are certain cards that you will pull out of the Mythos deck that will act as ongoing effects as well that will maybe have Eldritch tokens on them, and if they're ever down to 3, sorry, you may stop with 3, if they're ever down to 0, then that is game over as well. This game is really battling in a lot of ways to kill you, stop you from stopping the Elder One awakening, from the cultists completing their rituals, and from the world being devastated by the rise of the Cthulhunian. So that is how the game progresses each round. You will take your turns, you will have your encounters, you will draw a Mythos card which will drive the game forward in one way or another, and ultimately you will defeat the bad guy or you will get defeated and you will run out of time and they will awaken, take over the world, and everybody dies a horrible death. Look, the amount of enjoyment that you're going to get out of Eldritch Horror depends on how much you like the inherent randomness and luck-based systems that are in play. It is, at its heart, a card-based game. Almost every aspect of the game is driven forward by cards. There are only so many cards in each pack, but each obviously expansion that you get adds more cards to certain packs. And also, you know, there are only so many iterations of how you can play that, but that is almost exponentially huge because of the number of decks there are, the number of cards in each deck, and therefore you're never going to pull out the same variation each time. But you will still start to see some of the same cards come out the more that you play the game. Obviously as well, it's a dice-based, luck-based combat and encounter system based on the test that you've got there. And your enjoyment in this game will come down to how much you enjoy almost the randomness and the luck-based elements of it. You can mitigate as much as possible in this game. You can beef up your investigators by obviously finding artifacts and items and spells, etc. So you are playing a constant game of mitigation. What you may not do at any one point, or may not be able to do at any one point, is actually solve the game because there is so much luck and random elements in here. However, I think it's really important to say that I've played this game more than a dozen times now, and I've never felt an early sense of loss in this game. I have continued playing almost to the very, very end, and I've won maybe 40-30% of the games I've played, and other games I haven't won. Obviously, I've lost on those as well. In fact, I had a particularly epic game not so many nights ago as well. I played it over 3 nights, and it came down to the very, very last Mythos card turn. I solved my final mystery, and I was heading back, and I was there, but everything was down, and I had a card that said if there is no tokens on this card, so if something happened that would trigger it, there are no tokens left on this card, then I would lose the fight unless I could spend a clue to mitigate that. Unfortunately, I spent my clue to defeat the very last mystery, but you don't actually defeat it until the end of the Mythos turn. I turned over the Mythos card, and what it said on there is something happened that progressed that card. I'd used my last clue. I couldn't mitigate getting that Eldritch token off that Mythos card. It meant I lost the game that I played over 3 nights on the very last card turn of the game. It could have gone completely the other way. Now, if those elements aren't for you, if you don't like that element of potential swinginess, then maybe this game isn't for you. For me, I thoroughly love this game. It's a game that tells a different story every time I play it. It's not totally thematically linked. Sometimes some of the encounters just don't seem to make any sense to what happened before. I don't really mind that whatsoever. I get the fact that I'm exploring a world map and things happening throughout the world map. I'm just starting to get the interplay now between 2 or maybe more investigators and try and maximize on the benefits, the inherent abilities of each investigator. There is a ton of kind of variability and replayability within the base game alone. As I say, I've added some of the small expansions, and I'm still in awe of some of the journeys and some of the stories this game is telling me. So there we go. It's not all sunshine and daffodils. You know, I think it's a great game if you don't mind certain elements of mitigating against luck and the randomness that kind of card draws can give you. One thing this game has never failed to give me is a rock solid experience. It's been a little bit swingy a couple of times. There are times when I've rattled through the game and defeated an ancient one with a couple of investigators in almost no time whatsoever, and then there's other times when I played with the same investigators against that same ancient one and been nowhere near defeating them. So there is an element of swingy, but it does tell some fantastic tales. Look, I resisted Eldritch Horror for a long time. I've hovered my finger above the buy button on Amazon so many times, and then Derek Rodriguez from Solo BG Podcast absolutely recommended this to me, sent me a message saying I had to try it out, and you know what? I'm so glad he did. The base game came, I set it up, and I was smitten, and then I bought the 3 expansions, and I will be getting more of the expansions as time goes on. It's a beast to set up. It's a bit of a beast to tear down, depending on your experience, on your story solution. But I don't mind. I find it almost ritualistic in setting the game up and putting it away. Look, for me, I really enjoy this game as a solo experience. I like kind of laying this out on the table, playing it maybe over a couple of nights, and having a tremendous amount of fun with the stories that it tells. For an older game, where the mechanics may not be as sophisticated as some modern games, it absolutely works. I just think it is, if you haven't got it in your collection, it's relatively inexpensive for the base game. I would absolutely suggest, as a solo player, going out, buying a copy of Eldritch Horror, playing it a few times. Don't give the first game, let the first game dictate exactly whether you're going to enjoy this or not. Play it a few times. It's quick to pick up. You could teach it if you wanted multiplayers, but for me, I thoroughly enjoy Eldritch Horror by Fantasy Flight Games. And that's it, Not Board Gamers. Once again, thank you very much for joining me on this journey, this time through Eldritch Horror, one of my cult of the old games. Look, I think it's a great game. There's a lot to lay out on the table, but I do think it is a great game that tells some great stories. It is slightly dated in terms of its mechanics, and I don't really mind that whatsoever. If you haven't got it, go and invest in a copy of this. I haven't played Arkham, so I couldn't say how it marries up to Arkham Horror, but I think there's just so much game here, so many stories to be told. It's just a really fun game to play. Okay, so once again, thank you very much for joining me on Not Board Gaming. My name's Mark, I've been your host. Please remember you can like and subscribe to the channel. You can follow us on Instagram or Facebook. That's always BORED, so that's Not Board Gaming, always BORED. I say like and subscribe to the channel. Check out our other videos, and remember, if you've got no one else to play with, there's nothing wrong with playing with yourselves.